Today is a big day. Today we're talking windows, Expedition Camper windows. And that's right, now that I have the Expedition Camper box built, it's time to do the nasty and put some really big holes into this thing. And so I have double checked my measurements. I've gone through the process of laying everything out, where to cut these windows in, but I'm going to give you some tips and tricks about what I'm doing, how I'm doing it as far as installing windows. And I'm going to walk you through that, as well as why also I chose the windows that I chose. So let's get going. Okay, to start with the windows that I'm putting in from Motorcraft Adventure Development out of the UK. They provide online this downloadable window installation guide. I've gone through it, I've read it several times. They provide some directions, two different forms of directions, one using a plunge router with a template, and I am not going to do it that method. I am instead going to go ahead and do it through the other method, but I'm actually modifying it. I'm doing it different than the way they did it, and I'm going to explain why I'm doing it differently as I go through this process. You can see I've taken many notes down here, and then also on the very last page, it's probably really the most important page, and that is right here, really the whole window guide. And what I've done is, these are a metric, which is great. I wish we always did everything in metric, because millimeters, adding 1 millimeter to another millimeter is really easy math versus doing fractions like we do here in the US. But nonetheless, I went ahead and converted it to fractions, because that's what my tape measuring rules are in. I mean fractions, I mean inches. And so I went ahead and did it into the inches and fractions of inches for the different measurements here for the windows that I have. And then I went ahead and make sure I wrote down what exactly those are: outside frame, the exterior cut, the interior cut, because there's two different cuts on these windows. I have to cut the outside frame wider, a hole on the outside wider than the inside hole, and so the outside hole will not be the full depth of cut through the wall. So I've got those down here, and obviously that's pretty easy, but really the layout of the windows is key. So let's go into the layout. Okay, so it's a perfect time to be installing windows, because it is cold outside. It is actually snowy. It's been quite stormy, and so it's a good time to be putting holes in the camper and hopefully filling them all in correctly. So I've got my location of my windows, my 5 windows, 3 small ones in the back here and the 2 larger ones. These are actually all to scale in our locations. You see, I even went ahead and measured out in CAD the dimensions to the edges from the back wall, because that's my easy way to measure it out. That's easy to get, of course, really where the sides are of the windows. The next biggest thing is, of course, the height. And so, like here in these windows, I don't want them, of course, lower than the bench height will be. And I don't want them higher, the top of the window, higher than the upper cabinet will be. And really the same goes true here from the bed. I don't want the bottom really lower than the bed frame, and the top of the window frame above where the upper cabinet will be above the bed area here. And so those are things to think about. But really what I did is I went ahead and I laid in bed, not the course this bed, but another bed, laid in bed. I measured from the floor up to about where my eyes are, what I could see out, what I liked from a height perspective. And then I translated this to really what the height would be here in the camper. And that's how I got my height of these windows. So I really had what I think was a good height. So laying in bed or sitting up in bed, I'll be able to see out as well as possible. The other thing here is for the benches, same thing. I sat and measured really what the height of my eyes would be, what probably someone else's eyes would be, since I'm a little bit taller than most, and also seeing down to the ground versus also making sure to be able to see out the horizon, and not just from sitting down the bench, but also from standing up here in the main kitchen area. From standing height, make sure you can see out to the horizon. It's one of the things I don't like about the windows that are in my van. Those windows, unfortunately, the top of them is really too low for me to see out the horizon, so I have to duck down. So I want to make sure I can see out to the horizon from standing up in here, and of course from sitting down as well. And so getting that height was key. Getting them centered between the benches and kind of what's an ideal position here from bed to be able to see out from bed is fairly easy, but that height is really tricky. So having done this, I realized that I really didn't like the height after I lined them all up. So let's take a quick look here at what I did. Installing these Expedition camper windows, before I started making my first cuts, I already stopped myself, because I realized after I marked them out and taped them out, they're probably not in the ideal place. So I'm going to redo them after hours of work. And I'm going to walk through why I did that. And I'm going to hopefully save you hours of work with some ideas on how I did it, and how also to think through where to put your camper windows. No matter what kind of windows you're installing, the location of them is absolutely pivotal in regards to your ability to see out, see the horizon, see the clouds, see the ground, see people outside, get the light inside, make sure it works with your cabinetry and furniture inside. So I'm going to give you some various different pointers on how I've gone through this process. It has been hours of work and thought to go into it, and so hopefully I'm going to save you a bunch of that. And also I'm going to redo what I've done here, and so hopefully I'll save you those hours of redoing something as well. So let's get on it. So I went ahead and did a lot of work, and I'll give you a few tips and tricks here. And this is partly how it's going to make it fairly easy to readjust the height of these two windows. The large one here over the dinette, and the smaller one here that'll be over the bathroom, over the bed area. One thing I did is I used dry erase markers. This is a good trick for you on this Total Composites box, and I think any FRP wall. You can see you can wipe it off easily. It should clean up really nice and easily. So I could draw different marks too, so I knew what the dimension should be inside and certainly on the outside. And I even put my tape over it by accident, not by accident, but just because the markings went away. But I went ahead and marked a bunch of stuff out to get all my measurements right. And using the dry erase marker works really well for that. Just also make sure I know, like, okay, what did I do? Okay, I measured down 15.5 from the roof. That equals 12 inches, roughly 12 inches from the ceiling, interior ceiling height, and that's where this is. And then also I marked my corners, and this is of course where I'm going to cut, is all the way around like that. And so I did the same with the window over the bed, or the two windows over the bed, and also wrote down some measurements and stuff there too, similar. Now unfortunately what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift this whole window down, and I'm going to shift that one up. And so in both of them, unfortunately, I've got to adjust the vertical positioning of this. Fortunately, my horizontal or the vertical lines, which is my horizontal position of the window, are going to remain the same, so I'm just going to carry those down. But a few tips and tricks is that when you do carry those down, what I did is I used a level for all these lines to make sure that they are level with the camper. And I say with the camper because the camper right now, how it's sitting with really no weight in the rear and so forth, it sits up in the back. And so I took that bubble level measurement and I really just mimicked that same bubble level measurement for my horizontal and my vertical lines. So everything should be square. I checked square with a square, and I'll show you that in a little bit here. I'm going to go over some more details on that. I did that for both, and also I checked my measurements in all four directions to make sure I do have square on these angles, all my angles and my measurements. So now I've got to translate this back down. It'll be fairly easy with the level and the squares, but I've got to kind of redo it all. I'm going to basically keep my tape up probably where it is. It'll just be a little extra protection for when I do bring my saw over this and cut it, which I'm going to go into that. And then I'll just put some new tape down. So I'm going to use some extra tape. I'm going to have to carry these lines to new lines, and then I'll basically erase the dry erase marks or just cross them out so I make sure I know exactly where I'm cutting so I get my cut marks correct. So let's go through this journey of installing these windows and the different steps on how to do this. All right. La-di-da-di-da. So first step, wherever your window is going to go, is take some rubbing alcohol, some paper towels, and really just clean up that area. So I'm just going to clean this up. Gives you a chance to clean up some of the marks that are on the wall, left over from installing it, from them sitting out in storage, being dirty, the shipping, and just the installation process, which undoubtedly gets a little bit of dirt on it. And I'll do a far better clean once this thing's all done, but this at least gives me a chance to get it nice and clean so the tape will stick, and also the dry erase markers are also going to work well. So I've got here on my ladder, I'll show you my little trick I've got going. I've got my tape I'm going to put on. I've got my marker, I've got tape measures, I have my paper towels, and then I've got here my T-square, and also right above me here, I've got my level and my longer ruler. So by having all these nice and handy, it makes it really easy to work away. And then of course the key thing is, I went ahead inside where it's a lot warmer than outside here. You can see I've got even my Motorcraft Adventure Development sweatshirt on, trying to stay warm. And also I figured what a better way to wear this sweatshirt that they gave me in the boxes with the windows, totally by surprise. It's keeping me warm out here while it's cold outside. And so we're gonna get busy. So I've got here my dry erase marker, little built-in erasers, which help sometimes when you need to clean up a little section. I have a couple different colors. And so I'm going with a different color than what I put on before, and that way I can distinguish what the previous lines were versus that I'm going to change from. And then sitting inside where it's nice and warm, I took the dimensions from Motorcraft Adventure Development, the aperture of the window, the opening of the window. Again, I laid in bed and I sat in a chair and I took a tape measure and figured out like where was kind of the optimum height from both those places, and also from standing, just taking a tape measure and looking out of the window across the horizon at about the distance of where the window would be. Because obviously if you're putting a tape measure against a wall and you're staying 20 feet from it, that's going to be very different, aperture than in a camper where you're only going to be, 1 to 3 feet away, right? Took those measurements and really, did my best judgment of what I thought would the window should be vertically. So I adjusted those, did some math and so forth on that, calculations here and I wrote down notes and stuff on that. So I've got my new measurements. Okay, so here's what I did. I went ahead and, like I said, I put the tape here. It's really more as a protector for the outside wall from scratching with the saw that I'm going to saw, and also to hold back a little bit of the dust and prevent any kind of little bit of fracture or something that could happen on the wall. I don't think anything that's going to happen, but just more there as a protector. Then I use my dry erase marker, and again a dry erase marker because it easily comes off. As you can see, just wipes right off. So any little bit of overmarks or whatever, no big deal. And I've got my measurements on here to make sure I remember everything going on. And because I'm changing this layout, I went ahead and X through the lines that I'm not cutting to make sure I don't overcut and cut a bigger hole than the window is. That would be traumatic. And then what I've done is done a few things. One is I used a level, and I used that level to check what the level of the camper body is. And then I tried to really just mimic that same level or transfer that same level to my verticals and horizontals on this window. So that the window is level with the camper itself. Since again, the camper's not sitting level right now, there's no weight in the rear, it's jacked up in the rear. And so that, changes its level. So I don't want a window that's a little bit of cockeyed because it's level to the ground, but not level to the camper. And so I did that, and then also I've gone through and using the guide from Motorcraft Adventure Development or whoever your window manufacturer is, made sure I have the right interior and exterior cuts down to the fractions of an inch. And then I've gone through and I've double checked all those in every direction just to make sure that all my dimensions are correct. I've also went ahead and basically have marked more or less where my corners are and crossed out where I'm not going to drill. And so I make sure I've got that all clear. So I've got those holes marked out in my corners here for my interior and exterior cuts. And so what I'm going to do, this is my plan. So this is really the key of it, but this is the setup. I'm going to take some time to get all this set up. You're distancing from the rear, distancing from the top, etc. This is my bed platform that's going to be here. So how high is it going to be above the bed platform to cover for the bed frame and the mattress height. Now that I've got it set here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill my interior holes all the way through, and I'm going to drill from the outside in, and this way if there's any kind of little bit of pushing out of the separation delamination of the fiberglass reinforced panel over the foam, it's on the inside, I can cover that up with cabinetry and things like that. It's not a water leak issue, or it's going to be easy to repair on the inside if there is such a thing. I'm just going to drill a small pilot hole through, like a 1/4 inch pilot hole through each corner, and I'm going to drill that all the way through the 2-inch thick sidewall panel here. That's going to mark my inside and my outside inside corners. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a hole saw, and I'm going to, because hole saws only really can go up to about 2 inches deep, I'm just going to take it in just under that 2 inches deep. And also because what might happen if I go all the way through the whole inside is I could create a little bit of delamination or something like that, and I won't be able to see it if I'm drilling from the outside. So I'm going to take it pretty much just up to about the inside wall. And I'm going to take that hole saw, basically put my corners, and I'm going to put rounded corners there so I get a radius on the corners to make sure I don't have any delamination or so forth, and also so I can get my plunge saw in. I only do that on my inside, so I'm going to use those pilot holes from the outside here. I'm going to drill the hole saw in from the inside that way, and then that'll create any delamination or create my rounded hole. And then I'm going to take a plunge circular saw with a laminate bit, which is made for cutting through fiberglass. It's a fine blade bit, and I'm going to basically from both the inside corners, I'm going to cut to inside corner and inside corner, and that hole saw will allow me to, because the saw won't be able to cut the full depth, I'll be able to get pretty much up right into that hole saw. And then I'm going to replicate the same on the outside. And the outside I can cut in slightly deeper, and so hence I don't really need to do the hole saw on the outside, because I can take that saw a little bit past that line. As long as I don't go past my outside lines with that saw, I'll be fine. And then that'll allow me to then push out this interior plug and get that whole interior plug out of here. Then what I have to do is cut this outside. Same kind of method. I'm going to take a hole saw through my outside corners here to give it a nice radius cut. I'm going to drill that in the depth of the window from the outside that mounts in, which is about 1.5 inches, so about 3/4 of the total depth of this thickness of this wall. I'm going to drill those in that 1.5 inches. I'm going to go ahead and put a marker on my hole saw so I know what the depth is. I'll drill all 4 of these outside corners, and then I'm going to take my circular saw once again and basically drill up to each corner to corner to corner to corner, right? And again, because the saw blade won't quite, I'll set it to that 1.5 inch depth so I don't go any deeper, right? I do not want to go through the interior wall because the window cutout for the interior is smaller than the outside. That's why I have to go through this kind of 2-step process, one cut from the inside, one to the outside. And that'll then get me my depth basically at 1.5 inches from the outside, and my cuts all the way through, including my holes in the corner, rounded corners. And my inside's now been cut out. And so now I can push that out. So I mean, that's already gone, that's out of there. All right, so now I'm going to have stuck, because the inside wall is still going to have a little bit of foam that's going to hold this outside section on, this outside rim, if you want to call it that. Then I'm going to use an oscillating plunge saw to basically plunge into the wall that 1.5 inches or that extra depth thickness between the interior and exterior cut, and just go to that thickness all the way around, and at that 1.5 inches in from the outside, right? And then that'll allow me to remove this outside trim piece without any kind of breaking or anything of the foam on the inside of this window frame. And so it'll make a nice clean separation, nice clean edge. And then the window should just glue right into that. It should recess right in. I'll show you the windows a little bit and the rounded edges on those so you can see and understand what has to happen there. And there's also more step I have to do in the trimming of these windows to reduce the height of them before I go and do this installation. And I'm actually more worried about that part, even though cutting a big hole into the side of your new camper is definitely frightening. But I only have 2 window sizes, so I'm going to start with the small windows and do those and glue those in, get these cut and glued in, and then go on to the big ones and do the same thing. It's that way I'll have a little bit of a learning lesson. If there's anything I need to adjust, I can adjust it. So let's go take a look at these windows. You can understand what I'm talking about, the trim ring, all right? And then we'll get to cutting. Okay, so I've got my 3 small windows laid out here for Motorcraft Adventure Development. I'll show you what what the outcome is and what I've done is I bought the monsoon windows, which come in 2 different sizes, and they have this nice, beautiful upper trim ring here. You have to say, don't these windows look really great? Really nice glass Expedition camper window, very thick. I'll definitely give more of a review once I get these installed and so forth. They also have a really nice, look at this, look at that nice machined handle. Isn't that lovely? It's beautiful, isn't it? You gotta admit, it's a really nice looking window, right? And so what I've done, they've got this fiberglass tape or strip that's kind of filled in a little bit of a gap here. They've got a little bit of goop over the fasteners that come through the fiberglass here. And then this was all hollow. And so what I did is I filled this in with a little bit of expanding foam and then some self-leveling polyurethane sealant. I used specifically a polyurethane sealant to make sure that the polyurethane adhesive sealant that I'm going to use to adhere these to the exterior walls can sit in here. And the idea why I did that is because this gap right here is, you look at that, that's, you know, almost 2 inches deep, and so that would all have to fill in with the adhesive sealant, which is pretty expensive stuff per tube, you know, $22+ a tube, and it would have taken forever to cure because it's not made to be that thick, and plus that would have been trying to cure while this is gluing, but yet all completely sealed up. It really would never have fully cured, and so, or it would have taken years, you know, like the Hoover Dam to cure, decades. So I sealed this up, I put the expanding foam in there, let that dry, and then put this self-leveling sealant over that. And so this gives me a nice kind of flush surface here to mount it to. It's still a little bit recessed, as you can see, intentionally, so I can still fit that adhesive sealant in here and get this pressed up against the camper wall. So that's what I've done there. The other thing that I'm going to have to do is cut this trim ring down. And so if we look at this trim ring, this is really the depth from the outside wall, the surface of the outside wall, really to the end of this trim ring, which is what the blind's attached to. I'm trying to get this tape measure here so you can see it. And you can see that's about 5 inches. And that is way deeper than, of course, these Total Composite box sidewalls are at only 2 inches. Now the blind could be sitting proud, but I don't, you know, that proud. I don't want to be sitting out 3 inches from the interior wall. So I'm going to have to cut these down. One of the challenges is that this latch here and its mechanism of how it attaches right here, if we really measure to that, it's right about 3 inches out from this exterior wall. So I'm going to go with that 3 inches. I'm going to cut this down basically right at that line. So it's 3 inches from this outside wall face. And so that means where my blinds are going to attach is right about exactly at that 3 inches. And so I'm going to have to fur out the interior here 1 inch. So the blind's going to be sitting out proud from the wall 1 inch. It's not ideal, but I've got a method for doing that I'll share with you coming up that I think will work really well. And so anyways, that's what I have to do. So it's a little bit of extra modification. Cutting the fiberglass is not necessarily hard with a good blade for that, although fiberglass is incredibly abrasive, and so the blades up pretty easily. The tricky part is really how to cut it. I could do a jigsaw around, but I think the way the saw blade's going to pull on it, it might mess up this beautiful, nice interior gel coat, which is gorgeous. So I'm going to use, again, a circular saw with a nice laminating blade. I think that's going to do a better job of not only keeping a straight line, but also not scarring up this gel coat. And so what I'm going to do in order to help prevent that is to tape it to help protect it and go very slowly and hope that that cuts down that trim ring just perfectly and nicely and evenly all the way around, so the blinds are flush and level as well. So that's going to be the trick. It's definitely going to be a little bit of a process, but that'll hopefully help to get these windows installed, these really nice, lovely windows.